The CPI inflation report was released a couple of days ago, revealing a notable uptick in headline inflation. The report for August indicates that headline inflation stands at 3.7%, a rise from the 3.2% recorded in July. However, when we consider core inflation, which excludes food and energy prices, it's at 4.3%, marking an improvement from the 4.7% seen in July. Now, I'd like to delve into the details of the CPI inflation report, discussing what the Federal Reserve might do about interest rates next week and touching on the state of the economy and the potential for a recession. Let's start by highlighting key points from the CPI inflation report, focusing on energy prices, food prices, shelter costs, and services. Beginning with energy, we observe a year-over-year decline of 3.6% in energy prices. However, when we examine month-to-month changes, energy prices surged by 5.6% from July to August. Gasoline prices alone witnessed a substantial 10.6% increase in just 1 month. It's important to note that lower year-over-year energy prices have contributed to the overall moderation of inflation figures. Nevertheless, moving forward, energy prices are anticipated to exert upward pressure on overall inflation, lifting to food prices. The report indicates a year-over-year increase of 4.3% in food prices. I'll provide you with specific statistics for everyday items, and I welcome your feedback if you've observed different price trends at your local grocery store. Here are the year-over-year inflation figures, sourced directly from the CPI inflation report. Eggs have declined by 18.2%, butter is down by 4.8%. Milk prices have decreased by 3.5%. Fish prices experienced a marginal 0.1% increase. Coffee prices are up by 0.9%. Fruits and vegetables have risen by 2.1%. Meats show a 2.6% increase. And bread prices have surged by 6.3%. Once again, and if you have different observations, please share them in the comments below. These statistics are directly sourced from the CPI report. In summary, the release of the CPI inflation report is indeed significant. It's crucial to monitor these inflation trends as they inform not only the Federal Reserve's potential actions regarding interest rates, but also the broader economic landscape, including the possibility of a recession. Now let's turn our attention to shelter costs, where we see a year-over-year increase of 7.3%. As I've elaborated on in my previous videos discussing CPI inflation, it's essential to understand that there is a significant lag effect when it comes to shelter inflation in the CPI reports. This lag occurs due to the CPI reports factor in pre-existing contracts, causing shelter inflation to rise and fall at a slower pace. You can envision it as a more gradual and smoother process compared to the real-world price fluctuations you may observe. Nonetheless, an inflation rate of 7.3% is clearly concerning, and it's crucial to note that any decline in this figure will also occur gradually as dictated by the CPI calculation methodology. Moving on to services inflation. It's currently reported at 5.9%, representing a slight improvement from July's 6.1%. I'll leave the discussion on services inflation here for now, as we'll delve deeper into this topic when we cover labor markets and the broader economy. Before we dive into the subject of interest rates and the economy, let's summarize the key findings from the Federal Reserve report released 2 days ago. This microeconomic data stems from the New York Federal Reserve and offers insights into inflation, employment, and the financial situation of everyday Americans. Your opinions on these findings are welcomed, so please feel free to share your thoughts. Let's start with inflation. According to Fed survey, here's what Americans anticipate will happen with inflation. In the next 12 months, they expect the price of gasoline to increase by 4.9%, the cost of food to rise by 5.3%, university or college education expenses to go up by 8.2%, medical care costs to surge by a staggering 99.2%, and rent prices to increase by 9.2%. These projections may align with your views or differ from them, so I'm eager to hear your perspective. Personally, I find the gasoline projection quite conservative, and I've noted that expectations for food and rent costs are higher than the current inflation rates for these items. Now let's shift our focus to employment. The average American is increasingly concerned about the risk of losing their job in the coming year. Specifically, 13.8% of working Americans believe they face this risk in the next 12 months, marking a 2% increase compared to the previous month. This reading is the highest it has been since April of 2021. Notably, two groups showed the most concerning figures in this regard: individuals with a high school education or less, and those with an annual household income of $50,000 or less. Unfortunately, it appears that these two groups are bracing for the hardest hits in the upcoming year. Turning to household finances, there's cause for concern. The average American, as indicated by the survey, anticipates a meager 2.9% growth in their annual household income over the next 12 months. This expectation has now fallen to its lowest level since July of 2021, signifying a worrisome trend. What's even more troubling is that the average expectation for household expenses is a growth rate of 5.3%. When you crunch the numbers without needing a calculator, the situation looks less than favorable. Now, let's direct our attention to what's looming next week. On Wednesday, September 20th, a significant day on the economic calendar. It's on this day that the Federal Reserve will make a critical decision regarding interest rates. Currently, the Fed funds interest rate stands at 5.5%. The Federal Reserve is contemplating whether to raise interest rates by an additional 0.25%, which would bring the Fed funds rate to 5.75%. To provide some context, just a year and a half ago, interest rates were hovering at a mere 0.25%, essentially at zero. Since then, the Federal Reserve has undertaken 11 rate hikes in an effort to combat inflation. What's particularly uncertain is whether this rate hike will mark the end of their interest rate increases for this economic cycle. A noteworthy aspect is that even though the rate of inflation has been receding, the Federal Reserve remains resolute in its mission to drive inflation down to a 2 target. While headline inflation has indeed subsided from its peak, it has shown a recent uptick from 3.2 to 3.7. Core inflation for the Consumer Price Index stands at 4.3%, and the Personal Consumption Expenditures core inflation is at 4.2%. It's worth noting that the Federal Reserve's preferred measure of inflation is PC core inflation, and at 4.2%, it remains double their target rate of 2%. Furthermore, PC core inflation actually increased last month, moving from 4.1 to 4.2%. Those are the statistics, but perhaps more crucial is what the Federal Reserve and its members are conveying. Lori Logan, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, stated on September 7th that skipping a rate hike might be suitable at the next meeting. However, this doesn't imply a halt to their evaluation of the data, as further assessments could lead to additional rate increases to combat inflation. In essence, Logan suggests that it might be best not to raise interest rates on September 20th, but they remain open to adjustments based on future data, possibly as soon as the subsequent meeting on November 1st. There's arguably the most influential voice comes from Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, who spoke at Jackson Hole on August 25th. Powell acknowledged that while inflation has subsided from its peak, it remains unacceptably high. He emphasized their readiness to further raise rates if deemed appropriate. Now, as for the economy and the specter of a recession, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has expressed optimism about achieving a soft landing. She stated feeling very good about this prospect and is also hopeful about curbing inflation and steering clear of a recession. However, a cautionary note comes from Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase. Dimon warns against presuming that U.S. consumers are currently robust, despite headlines suggesting strong consumer spending. He cautions against solely relying on real-time data and emphasizes the need to consider the future. Dimon implies that consumer strength can change rapidly, aligning with the Federal Reserve's warning that U.S. consumers may deplete their pandemic savings by the end of September. In forthcoming videos, we'll delve deeper into the economy and the potential for a recession. However, our immediate focus will be on the upcoming Federal Reserve meeting scheduled for Wednesday, as the interest rate decision holds paramount significance. To provide a glimpse of my perspective, I believe the economic situation may deteriorate before showing signs of improvement. This stance contrasts sharply with the Federal Reserve of Atlanta's outlook. I anticipate challenges in a higher interest rate environment and due to quantitative tightening factors that are unlikely to alleviate the situation. While some economic indicators may appear positive, I believe we're experiencing a K-shaped recovery, where the affluent fare well while others continue to face difficulties or struggle to fully recover in terms of standard of living adjusted for inflation. Regarding the Federal Reserve's actions, on Wednesday, I anticipate they will refrain from raising interest rates. However, the more crucial decision may be what they choose to do on November 1st, their subsequent meeting following Wednesday's deliberations. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Until next time.